Hate on the internet is unavoidable. Since its inception, the internet has been full of trolls, be it they were bored housewives trying to blow off some steam, or fat social outcasts and nerds seeking to empower themselves via doing a little bit of tomfoolery in the forums. Either way, since its creation, hate has been intertwined within its culture. There have always been people that would turn on 4chan or whatever inferior image board forum site instead of it, and go to town on their keyboards and spew some of the nastiest shit that can be said about another human being and their race, religion, or whatever. However, in recent times I've noticed that it has been getting a bit out of hand when it comes to the hate directed to one particular group of people. Hell, it's even started to become normalized. Of course, I'm talking about none other than the Russians. Ever since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the internet has become increasingly more hostile towards Russia and Russians, and to a degree, arguably understandably so, considering Russia literally invaded another country practically unprovoked and has been waging an imperialist war for the past 2 years, where in the process it has ended thousands of lives and displaced hundreds of thousands. And let me be clear, the anger towards the Russian government and the state are 100% justified and deserved. It is really despicable. Even so, many have taken the opportunity to take this tragedy as an excuse to bully and ridicule people online, and sometimes in real life because of their ethnicity. A lot of people have forwarded this anger towards the Russian people themselves, and many Russians, be it in or outside of Russia, be they for or against Putin, have become demonized as a result. Throughout the internet you will find hundreds of thousands of comments calling Russians subhumans, orcs, slaves, and overall dehumanizing them in any sort of way possible just for the fact that they were born Russian. Many Russians who lived abroad in the West have been persecuted in person by vigilantes, and their businesses became victims of targeted harassment. In San Diego, California, for example, one Russian restaurant called
Pushkin Russian Restaurant
has been vandalized several times, and the owners have been harassed over the phone continuously, and even bomb threats were falsely made against the restaurant. The worst part is, the owner isn't even Russian, but Armenian. While not every case is as extreme as this one, it is still quite prevalent online, and you can see it all over Twitter, Reddit, and really any social media post that is relevant to anything Russian. And here's the thing, if you've grown up anywhere in the first world, hell, even the second, it. I'm sure even in most places in the third world, we've been taught not to hate people based on their skin color, ethnicity, religion, or anything that's their surface level identity. However, it appears for many people this applies for everyone except the Russians. And again, I get it. It's a despicable, evil war and Russia is 100% the aggressor. However, everyday Russians did not ask for this. In fact, almost 1 million Russians have left Russia since the invasion of Ukraine. Sure, some of the ones fleeing probably supported Putin and the war, but the majority was completely against it.
Hey there guys, I'm sorry for interrupting Janusz's speech, but he invited me out here to give a TED Talk. My name is Roman, I'm from the channel No Fuckers, I am a Russian, and I'm here today to complain about people being mean to me on the internet. Alright, just kidding guys, I already do enough of this on my own channel, but as a Russian who doesn't support Russia, who left Russia, and who is not a huge fan of Russia's traditional conservative new way, this is what I want to add to the conversation about Russophobia, and in particular the sort of gaslighting you feel as a Russian that's trying to comprehend what is going on in the world right now. And for the longest time, I would say for the majority of the entire last year, myself, as a non-Z Russian, I felt very conflicted, because a lot of the criticism of Russia I was seeing online had a lot of Russophobia in it. And a lot of the time I felt gaslighted by the internet community saying that either one, nobody actually cares about Russians and nobody actually dislikes you guys and all you guys just have a huge victim mentality and a victim complex. And the second point is, oh yeah, do you see what is currently happening in Ukraine? And you have the gall to talk about Russians' feelings and some sort of Russophobia and Russians being hated or persecuted or whatever, how dare you? And after hearing a ton of these arguments from a ton of people that I assumed are on the same side as me, I was actually feeling like, as a Russian currently, there is no space or place for me to talk about Russophobia and the hate that regular Russian people are facing. Because these people that essentially want to shut down this conversation told me that me talking about it essentially makes me a Z Russian patriot that only cares about the comforts of Russians and whatever. And I believe it's a very toxic argument to make, and it's something that I finally managed to break out of, and I've made several videos on my channel where I talks about how Westerners sometimes turn rightful criticism of Russia into basically just racism. And the the world didn't crash, and it actually turns out that even in the West, a lot of people are actually very interested to hear the viewpoint of Russians, and actually very interested in how Russians are feeling right now because of this entire situation. And I realized that at the end of the day, if nobody else will talk about these issues in the English language, then probably nobody else will. Because many people either don't care because they're not Russian and doesn't affect them, and they're more eager to join in on all of the hate, or there's people out there that do notice the Russophobia going up in the world, but who are too scared to speak about it because, well, then they'll face criticism for caring too much about Russians or whatever. And since I'm Russian, I decided that this is something that I do want to talk about, and it's something that we should talk about, because I believe that a blind hatred of a certain nation of people just because of what their government is doing is absolutely moronic, and it's something that we should fight against as a human collective to progress further in our monkey brain evolution. Because speaking about Russophobia does not mean that you're a supporter of Russia or like a lover of Vladimir Putin automatically. But yeah, just my 2 cents, something I wanted to say, no fuckers out.
Within Georgia and Serbia, the 2 countries where most Russians fled to, Russians have organized several anti-war protests since the eruption of Russia's aggression. Hell, in September 2023, during Serbia's Pride Week, a huge number of Russians even came out to march with the LGBT community, which the Russian media then condemned. Also, in Serbia, many conservative Serbs were appalled at the Russians coming in. Many expected them to be conservative and pro-Putin as they were, but were utterly shocked that they were liberal and anti-war. Yet, even so, NAFO idiots and other half-wits online assume that they must be warmongering evil people just because of their passport. And again, it's quite ironic because they propagate for a democratic liberal system, human rights and whatnot, yet when it comes down to Russians, they act as if they straight up walked out of the Jim Crow era. For example, this cretin was literally making fun of a kid that lost his father in a war all because of his ethnicity. Never mind that Russia has implemented a partial draft that calls upon all people with military experience and that all male citizens are subject to conscription for a year, which basically rules almost the entire male population except those exempt because of some medical or psychological impairment. And never mind that recently Russia implemented that many conscripts changed their status to contract soldiers and made it so that if you're on a contract there is no term for service as long as the special military operation is ongoing. His father certainly went to the military willingly, and no way in hell did he not want to come back. And of course, he wanted nothing else than to leave his child and wife alone. Now, a lot of the defenders of Russophobia like to point to polls taken in Russia that point to vast support for Putin's party and the special military operation as their big gotcha moment. Or they claim, oh, but they should actively protest against the government and the war. If they're not doing anything, they're complicit. However, what a lot of people who make this argument fail to realize is Russia is not a democracy. It's not even a flawed democracy like most of the Balkans or Eastern Europe. It is straight up an authoritarian dictatorship. Opposition leaders get jailed or assassinated. Recently, the state barred the upcoming opposition wannabe presidential candidate, Yekaterina Duntsova, from even submitting her documents to run as president, in much the same fashion as was the case with Alexei Navalny when he tried to run for president. Protesters even get beaten and jailed for ridiculous amounts of time and aren't even given proper trials. Polls and election numbers are fudged easily because, again, one party controls the entire state and its operations, and opposition parties, like the previously mentioned case of Duntsova, aren't even allowed to register for elections. The same people who make these arguments also don't trust Russia's reports regarding their losses and gains in the war because the state is so utterly corrupt, but when it comes to their opinion on the regular Russian people, they are the holy script for their hate. The majority of Russians just want to live their lives. On average, the monthly salary in Russia is $684. However, if you take out Moscow, St. Petersburg, and the oblasts, okrugs, and krais rich with natural gas, that average falls into the $450 to $480 a month range. Add on top of that the entirety of the EU has practically sanctioned all Russian citizens and made it notoriously difficult for them to immigrate, and the situation outside of Europe isn't that much better for them either. It is as a result notoriously difficult for a Russian to leave their country. Consequently, whether they like it or not, they have no options but to follow the rules within Russia or face dire consequences and have their entire lives ruined. And if they have a family member and earn anywhere near the average income, having one person jailed can also ruin the lives of several others by plunging them into poverty because the father or mother can no longer help in providing for the household. It's not like the US where you can actively protest against the Vietnam or Iraq war. If you do that shit in Russia, you're done for. And this isn't a video of Le Serb/Hungarian bootlicking master Russia, which I'm sure some Reddit and Twitter experts will dismiss it as, but I just see it as a grave injustice considering the amount of Russians outside of Russia I've met and have had to hear their stories regarding the discrimination they had to go through for their only sin being born in the wrong country. If it was happening to any other group of people in a similar manner to how it's happening to Russians, I'd speak up for them as well. And this isn't a video of minimalizing what's happening to Ukrainians. They have also suffered tremendously because of this invasion. However, two wrongs don't make a right. It wasn't right to discriminate against the Japanese in America during World War II, and it's not right to discriminate against Russians outside of Russia. You can't hold one person responsible for what their government does, especially when they're trying their best to escape it. There's no reason to use the war in Ukraine to bully someone online. Don't judge people based on ethnicity, but on their ideas.